Nice. Maximum effort, and I appreciate it.
Today we are fortunate enough that Canon are actually bringing an R3 down for us to try out we'll have it for about 5 hours to test it out for a few different things. So I've planned out a couple of different things. We're going to do a basketball shoot to test out things like AF, image stabilization, the speed of it, all that kind of stuff. We're going to do a shoot with bikes as well, so on a track and then around this sort of forested area as well, to test out the tracking through the trees and all that kind of stuff. I'm really excited to actually test this out. We've got all the spec, all the info. I should say up front, this is a beta sample that we're going to be using, so all of the stuff you're going to see, and there should be a lot of stuff that you're going to see from the camera, is all shot on a beta sample of the product. But, whew, I am very excited. But before we get into any of that, let's talk about some of the specs of this camera, because we now know all of the details. So first up, 24 megapixel back illuminated stacked CMOS sensor. And I've got to say, whew, the images look so good from this camera. The colors, you know, those Canon colors, they look amazing. The sharpness, it's just all very, very lovely. Now I know what some of you are going to be thinking. 24 megapixels, you might have been expecting a higher resolution, but I think there's a good reason that we're looking at 24 megapixels here. With a camera like this, which is obviously designed for sports, news gathering, wildlife, stuff like that, there has to be an emphasis on speed, both in terms of shooting, but also transfer and all that kind of stuff. And there has to be a balance between resolution, speed, and file size. You know, if you're in a situation where you're taking photos at a sporting event, something like that, you need to be able to transfer those photos very fast. And part of that is keeping the file size down a little bit. Now, of course, you've got the R5 if you want a higher resolution camera with that kind of capability. This is not the R5. This is an incredibly high-end, frankly awesome camera, but there's a reason that it's a lower resolution than the R5 at 24 megapixels. That said, 24 megapixels is still more than enough for most things. You know, you can still crop in without really any problems at all. You know, I use 24 megapixels all the time. I think it's a perfectly decent resolution. So I think it's a good compromise for that file size and the speed you're going to be wanting to use as well. So obviously this is a fast camera, 30 frames per second continuous shooting or 12 frames a second with the mechanical shutter. And that's all with AF/AE tracking. And I have to say, shooting sports at that speed is just a joy. You are pretty much guaranteed to get the perfect moment because you are just capturing so many of them. But on top of that, Canon have managed to almost entirely remove the rolling shutter effect, which is such a huge deal. We've all seen those images with the bendy golf club, and not having to deal with that is absolutely incredible and will be a big advantage for all kinds of photography and video. There's also new advanced flicker detection as well, so if you're shooting indoors, that's going to help a lot. So one of the main things I'm really noticing while using the camera is actually how much everything about it just seems to be geared up to helping you as a photographer, just making your life as easy as possible. And with that in mind, what better time than now to talk about the autofocus? I would happily say that over my 4 or 5 hours with the camera, I think this is the best autofocus that I've ever used. I think it's incredibly fast. And it's so reliable, it just starts tracking subjects perfectly before I've even started doing anything. And I can honestly say I took over 600 shots and none of them missed on the focus. Now this is all powered by the dual pixel CMOS AF2 system that we've seen before, but with a totally revised AF algorithm. And that means that of course there's eye and face detection for humans and animals. The tracking is incredible. It'll also track vehicles and even helmets if you're shooting something like motorbike racing. And it's about 30% faster to focus than even the 1DX Mark III. So you know this is lightning fast, and you can really feel it when you're shooting with it as well. But the big new feature, of course, is the eye control AF.
So we've done a bunch of basketball shots, we've done a bunch of sort of general bike shots on the track and wide angle and all kinds of stuff. I just did the running, hence why I'm a little bit out of breath. And now we're going to try the 100 to 500, tracking through the trees while we've got the subject riding the bike. So far, the autofocus on this is just out of this world. So it's super fast, super accurate. I love the eye control so much more than I thought I would. I thought when I first read about that, maybe it'll be a bit gimmicky, but it works super well. So it's not, you know, not so much for tracking in terms of kind of watching your subject move with the eye, but you look where you want to focus, activate the autofocus. That's now got that locked in, and then it started tracking my subject without me even having to do anything. So pretty much ideal, pretty much absolutely perfect for for things, you know, for certain things. So for example, if I had two people ride a bike down here, I could look at one of them, activate the autofocus, focus on that one, telling the camera that's one I want to focus on. With one person, it's still useful, but with two, you know, two cars, two motorbikes, football players, whatever it might be, super, super handy to be able to do that so quickly. You don't have to move the focus point with your thumb. So loving that. We're gonna do this now. Okay! Let's see how this goes. Yeah, it's so much better, to be honest, moving the, like, that's a really handy thing to be able to essentially move the focus point around just with your eye. That is, here we go. So just look at him, focus, perfect. Then it's tracking him, amazing. It's picking up his face. That's amazing. Gotta say, the viewfinder looks good as well. Really, really crisp, bright. It's that kind of viewfinder where you know you've got a good photo just through the viewfinder. You know, it's not that kind of low res or doesn't look great, but then you get back home and it looks good. That actually looks good when I'm looking at it through the camera, which is exactly what you want. Now, in-body image stabilization is obviously a big deal here as well, up to 8 stops with the right lenses. And it's really impressive, actually. I even tested it out running one-handed with the camera, following my subject on the bike just to see how steady that would be. Now, obviously that's not going to be super smooth, but I think it's pretty impressive considering I was literally running with the camera in one hand. Now that just gives you a huge amount of flexibility for the way you want to shoot things, you know, whether you're talking stills or video. And speaking of video, this is certainly no slouch for that as well. Obviously photography, this is amazing, but video, there are some incredible options here as well. So the headline kind of for the video is 6K up to 60 frames a second in RAW. And that is incredible. I think that's a genuinely fantastic option to have. Obviously, you're not going to be shooting in that all the time, but I think having that available to you is such a big deal. That is such an incredible thing to have available to you. On top of that, of course, you got 4K, 120 frames a second, Full HD, 120 frames a second. The 4K and the 1080p can either be 422 10-bit or 420 8-bit, and there's no recording limit either, so you're only really limited by battery and storage, so you're looking at about 6 hours as a maximum record time. Okay, cool. Yeah, whenever you're ready. So you can probably already tell the look and the feel of this camera has a lot in common with the 1DX Mark III, and that doesn't seem to be by accident. The actual button placement and the feel of the camera is set up so that you can come straight over from the 1DX cameras and feel right at home. The LCD touchscreen, which is also a vari-angle screen, is a 4.15 million dot display, and I got to test it out on pretty much the sunniest day of the year, so I know that it is definitely bright enough. I also love that it's vari-angle. I'm always a huge fan of that. It's just so useful. Now the viewfinder is also very nice. It's a 5.76 million dot OLED EVF, and again, it's nice and bright. It looks great, and overall, this is just a very comfortable camera to use. Nice and sturdy grip, and it feels slightly lighter than the 1DX, but still with that extremely solid feel. And it even takes the same battery. Now, speaking of battery life, I took just over 600 shots, and it didn't even seem to really make a dent in the battery life. I also did a bunch of video, you know, we were out and about doing all kinds of things all over the place, you know, really trying to make the most of it over the sort of 5 hours roughly that I had time with it. And it really didn't even seem to make a dent, like I say, in the battery life, which is incredibly impressive. You know, a bit like with the 1DX, to be honest, those batteries just last a long time, which is a great thing to have. That's very, very reliable. Now, something else which can be a bit of a concern with mirrorless cameras is how quickly they can turn on. And that's especially relevant when you're talking about a camera like this, but it does seem to be incredibly fast, and certainly fast enough that if you see something, you can absolutely turn it on, bring it up to your eye, and get the shot. Now, of course, on top of that, connectivity is a huge thing with a camera like this, and we see a lot of similarities with the 1DX Mark III here. We've got Bluetooth, we've got Wi-Fi, so you can transfer your files super fast, which is very important in a lot of sports or news gathering situations. Canon really do seem to have gone all out with this camera, you know, whether you're talking about image quality, which is fantastic, the speed of it, which is super, super quick, the AF, which is just out of this world, you know, and including the eye control AF, which, like I said earlier, I thought it might be a bit of a gimmick,
but then it just turns out to be incredibly useful, and I absolutely would use it. Admittedly, not all the time. Some situations you wouldn't want to use it, and if you're shooting video or you want to do landscape or something like that, it might not be the one, but it is incredibly useful for a lot of different situations. The IS is great, the video is great, the feel of the camera is amazing. There's a lot here, and Canon have really upped the game, and this does really feel like the forefront of photography. The main theme that I really want to hammer home with my time with it is that everything in this camera just works the way it's supposed to, but specifically, everything seems to be geared very much towards making your life as a photographer as easy as possible. It really, really does just feel like everything is working to help you get the shot you want to get. So you don't have to worry so much about the AF or, camera shake or whatever it is. There's like a lot of things going on here to make sure the shot is the main focus, no pun intended, of what you're doing. Now, of course, you can check out the camera for yourself down in the description. There's a link to go see the full spec, because there's a lot. You can go see all of that, you can go see the price, you can go see all the stuff. We don't normally talk about price here, but you can check it all down in the link in the description. Of course, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, because there's new reviews all the time, but there's also new tutorials, all the stuff, all the time. I will see you in the next video, and as always, thanks for watching.